Hey everybody, welcome. I'm here with Liz, and some of you know Liz. She's a practitioner who does coaching and counselling at Haven, and you'll know her from the free talks and the support groups that we've got coming up, and from our previous Q&As. And we're here with a great Q&A today. Would you like to read it out?
Yes, I'll read it. So it says, help on how to best approach this uneasy feeling. I'm noticing certain foods, particularly sweet things, don't make me feel very good after I eat them at the moment, but I'm still drawn to eating sweets in a regular, normal way. This is conflicting to me, as it seems logical to just stop eating the things that make me feel crappy, yet I don't want to feel restricted if I avoid all sweet things totally. Help.
Wow, what a
Good
question.
question.
Yeah,
Good question.
So let's nut out a few things that might help this person.
Yeah, so one of the things that came to mind is that, sweet things is a very broad statement. So what does actually sweet things mean? What I want to say is that restriction isn't necessarily what you are eating. It's how you are thinking about what you are eating.
Really good point, yeah.
So some people may not eat certain foods, but they don't feel restricted around them because they come with this mentality of, I'm allowed to eat it if I want it. Do I actually want the food?
Which is like the total opposite to diet mentality.
Exactly. So I think it's, from this question, and don't get me wrong, you never really know from a question, but it sounds like there may still be some black and white thinking around this food, which is really common because sweets are so demonized in our culture.
Yeah.
And that can then bring up that feeling of mental and emotional restriction of like, I shouldn't eat this, it's not okay for me. And that can actually end up, lead to us actually wanting to eat it more. It can also sometimes lead to stress as well when we are eating it because we feel like it might be bad for us.
Yeah, if we have that anxiety around food.
Yeah, exactly. And so what I'd really encourage this person to do is to start to notice if they've got any judgments around sweets, like any preconceived ideas about maybe if they are bad. Then just get really curious about what their experience is when they eat them. How do I feel? And even eat them in a different way. Like sometimes I encourage people, if they do have if they are in a situation, to maybe like make a sandwich for lunch, for example, and put some sweets on the side of their plate. Because that can be a way where you can try experimenting with eating them, which is kind of like less, like I'm doing quote unquote, like threatening than like a whole bag where you can eat the whole thing because you feel restricted.
That's
and then
such
you
a
eat it
cool
all
idea.
and then you go like, oh, I feel sick, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, sure.
And so instead just put a few, just put some on the plate with your sandwich and just start to experiment. Like, is a nuance, like maybe a certain amount of sweets make you feel sick. Maybe only certain ones don't make you feel good. Maybe, mixing it with other foods makes you feel okay.
Maybe the combination of different foods. And I wonder too if this person is noticing anything in particular around the times that they're eating, or how full or hungry they are, or what other emotional states going on as well, if that's impacting how they're feeling. Like I think they've just said, I'm not sure the wording, but I just feel crappy or I feel bad or whatever. So what does that actually mean? Is that physical or is that emotional? Or what?
Yeah, exactly. So I would just get really curious. Like, legitimately, certain foods don't always make people feel good. And at the same time, if we are breaking free from dieting, there still can be like lingering rules that are in our heads, which could be, tainting the situation. And
I call it the diet culture hangover.
Yes,
and I still
exactly.
have, I still find that creeping up every now and then. But it's the more awareness you have, the more you can kind of call it out and recognize it for what it is.
Exactly. And if the sweets legitimately do not suit this person, then you will find that out over time. Whilst if you continue to be really not judgmental as you eat them, and then over time they will lose their steam, and you'll get to that attitude which I kind of said at the beginning of, I can eat this if I want to. The question is, do I want it? And that will change depending on the time and the day and the season and all of that kind of stuff.
And I think sometimes too, like even when you get to that point, there can still be times when maybe a certain food makes you feel, physically, unwell if you eat so much, a certain amount of something or too much. Because like some foods have different impacts on our bodies, right? We know that. But sometimes also, like I think this is something I learned from Isabel, sometimes it's worth it, for example, if it's, a special celebration, there's a really delicious cake and you might eat a little bit more than what your body feels like satisfied with, you know, physically, but you might feel a little bit like sore belly or something, but maybe it was worth it because it was so fun and the cake was quite a special one or whatever.
Exactly. Like, you know, there's certain foods that still don't suit me to this day. You know, I try and, you know, so I sometimes still eat those foods, but I eat them when I want to, and I choose my moments. So for example, if I've got 2 big days at work, that's probably not going to be the days that I decide to experiment with foods that are kind of on the fence for me with how I feel. If it's the weekend, then I've got nothing to do, then like what you're saying, it might be worth it to kind of have that feeling of being a bit hungover.
I think that's really good. I think that's what intuitive eating is about too. Some people, it can get misconstrued, but it is about factoring in those times and maybe factoring in some organization for you know, planning stuff when you need to be organized for work and whatever, and it just has that fluidity that, you know,
exactly
fluctuate with life.
Yeah, so I think just like beware of, like, I think if I could give like 3 kind of tips, it would be to notice your judgments. Just be aware, are there any preconceived ideas that you have around this food? And the second thing would be to shift your mindset to a mindset of allowance. Like, I can have this food if I want to have it, but do I want it? And just get really curious about how things make you feel. And again, like, sweets is a very general term, so kind of really, That's awesome. And the third would just be get curious, get playful, and start to have sweets in a way that you might not normally have them, like with a meal, like at different times, and see if
that's such a cool idea, because that's something that I hadn't really come up with.
Cool.
All right, shall we wrap it up?
Wrap it up.
Thanks so much, Liz. I love your tips as always. Everybody, you can catch Liz at the studio. You can be part of the support group. It's complimentary for Haven members, or it's just a small fee if that's really something that interests you. And we'll share all the details below, and we'll see Liz again for the next Q&A.
Cool. Thanks for having me. See ya.
See ya.